This video is brought to you by one of my favorite things, something I use every single day, and that thing is Audible. Stick around to the end of the video for a special offer they're making available through my channel, or visit audible.com/skillup. That's audible.com/skillup. Now, you guys remember back when BioWare and Bethesda made good games, right? Man, those were the days. Back then, we used to get these awesome single-player, story-driven role-playing games with functional RPG gameplay full of meaningful choice and fantastic writing that you can tell was written by an actual adult who knew how to use actual words. While BioWare and Bethesda got all the kudos for these types of games in this era, there was one studio quietly toiling away in the background who cut their teeth by making sequels and spin-offs, and that studio was Obsidian. With KOTOR 2, Neverwinter Nights 2, and Fallout New Vegas, Obsidian took the work of BioWare and Bethesda and managed to build on it, with New Vegas in particular standing out as a cult classic for its brilliant writing and strong RPG systems, allowing for build diversity and replayability. It's been 9 years since the release of Fallout New Vegas, and with the lackluster Fallout 4, the disastrous Mass Effect Andromeda, and the cataclysmically awful Anthem and Fallout 76, it's really felt like this cinematic RPG genre was a dead one, abandoned by those who helped create it, left to languish by the wayside in the pursuit of live service monetization and paid mod shops. The journey to Outer Worlds then is an important one. It's a new IP, but it's far better to think of it as the Fallout New Vegas sequel that we never got from Obsidian, and the Fallout sequel we never got from the series creators Tim Kaine and Leonard Boyarsky, whose sharp wit was absent as Fallout made the jump from 2 to 3, from 2D to 3D, and from Interplay to Bethesda. For this reason, there's a lot of hype and anticipation for this game. Fallout fans, Obsidian fans, and fans of cinematic RPGs in general have all been pining for this game long before it was even announced, and I'm delighted to tell you that The Outer Worlds is awesome, and you are really going to love it. Let's knock over our particulars and hygiene factors first, since they're the most boring. Outer Worlds is available on Xbox, PS4, and PC. It's enhanced for the Pro and X consoles, but the X has some better upgrades, so if you own both consoles, you may want to pick it up on that. Epic Games bad. Yes, I see you in the comments section. Put down your pitchforks and hearken to me. You can get it on Xbox Game Pass. You can sign up to Game Pass for as little as $1. Seriously, you can play one of this year's best RPGs on your PC on release day for $1. Capitalism, man. It's no good for the people of the Outer Worlds, but it's sure as shit doing us a service today. So, one thing I was not expecting when I saddled up for the Outer Worlds is just how visually stunning it would be. I mean, look at this city. The world design of the Outer Worlds is the perfect intersection of a strong design aesthetic with a competent technical execution. These worlds don't look good only because of draw distances and lighting engines. They look good because the artist had a clear vision for how this world would look and rendered it in all its neon-drenched, frontier-inspired glory. Every new town you visit is this glorious vista of squat architecture crowned with this stunning skybox of planets and stardust. This visual presentation is so striking that you know this game is going to age beautifully. Like the green hills of Sonic or the timeless cell shading of Wind Waker, you know that you'll be able to return to the Outer Worlds in 10, 15, 20 years from now, and it will still hold up because its design presence has a timeless quality. Apart from the visual impact, I was immediately struck by how dense the world was. There's obvious stuff like the color range being so vibrant and otherworldly, and the lighting engine just sort of jacked up to 11 so that everything seems to emanate this kind of glow, but on top of that, all of the spaces felt so curated and enclosed. The best way I can describe it is that each space feels like a movie set. The surrounding terrain guides the player towards specific locations in a way that makes you think that what you can see is all that exists. The two-story buildings and their layout all sort of feel kind of fake and artificial, but in the best possible way. The entire tone of the game is this sort of campy, pulpy space adventure, and all of the environments seem like theaters on which this drama is being acted out, rather than realistic spaces you'd expect in other open-world sandbox games. Obsidian have opted for something that looks highly stylized, curated, focused, and unique. This is also evident in the way characters are framed in dialogue interactions. The lighting is brought up to illuminate them in a strange sort of way. They're framed in dead center. The background is slightly blurred to focus you squarely on the character at all times. It's like a spotlight is cast on whoever's speaking. It's, again, curated. It's weird, but it's awesome. I just absolutely loved how much style every inch of this game has, as though the weirdly contrived worlds of No Man's Sky were suddenly populated with interesting towns and even more interesting people. I did not expect this game to look this good. It looks fantastic. I reviewed this game on a PC on an RTX 2080 Ti running at 1440p max settings. Unfortunately, I was getting a fair amount of FPS loss in the game's open spaces. Internal spaces were totally fine, running at a rock solid 144 frames, which is what I capped it at. But when I was in the townships or the open world areas between the towns, I'd often see frame rates settle at around 50 to 60 frames and below that at times as well. It wasn't a deal breaker for me since 60 is still fine, but I wonder how other PCs will handle the game or how console performance might be. Depending on which platform you're on, I recommend doing some detailed research into performance before making the jump. Check something like Digital Foundry, for example. Obsidian games have a rich history of being pretty buggy and pretty janky, so I'm pleased as punch to tell you that in my entire playthrough of this game, which was about 25 hours, I had only one crash and 0 bugs. Like 0. No bugged quests, no bugged AI, no clipping into environments, no texture glitches, nothing. Like nothing. Nothing. Obviously, your mileage may vary, and I'm sure we'll see at least a few glitch montages. I'm looking at you, Shy. But for me, it was perfect. And that's such a big deal in an open world RPG like this, because there are so many things that could break for any reason. And to see that none of them broke throughout my entire journey, it gives me strong feels, and it reminds me that we shouldn't settle for any less when we buy new release video games. As for game length, since I know a lot of people wonder about this sort of stuff, I'm going to say that you can finish this game in like 15 minutes if you know what to do, but you can also spend 40 hours to do absolutely everything if that's how you want to play it. My playthrough was on normal difficulty, doing a fair chunk of side content along the way, and it took me around about sort of 20-25 hours. If I pushed to be relatively complete in my playthrough, I reckon it would have been about 30 to 35 hours, and yeah, like 40 hours to do absolutely everything. Just to be clear though, even 40 hours is just scratching the surface of what this game has to offer, because there are so many different ways to approach every single thing in this game, be that your build, your companions, where to go, what to do when you're there, who to help or who to kill, which factions you'll align with, etc, etc. I've accessed but one ending of a game that surely has at least 5 or 6 different endings, as all the tiny decisions you make along the way crescendo into this mighty conclusion that bears the fruits of all of your labors. There is a lot of game here if you're the person that wants to excavate all of its parts, and the best thing is that all of those parts are just wonderful. So let's talk about them now. So the other day I was browsing Twitter and I saw this.
So it knows if I'm speaking or not speaking. It knows if I'm moving, whether I'm walking around or just sitting at my desk during the day. It knows generally where I am in the office, and it also can tell my proximity to other people wearing badges.
It's a little device that some companies are now getting their staff to wear. It's a tracker. It records conversations. It tracks where you are in the office at any point in time. It tracks how long you spend on your break, how long you spend in the bathroom. It tracks who you are meeting and for how long. It tracks your goddamn posture. Now listen, if this freaks you out, good, it should. This is chilling, but it's also the future. You mean to tell me that Amazon won't have every one of its warehouse workers wearing one of these things in the next 10 years? Of course they will, because companies like Amazon are desperate to squeeze every ounce of productivity out of every single human cog in their gigantic machine. Now, not to get political here, but The Outer Worlds is an interesting game for our times. 20 years into the 21st century, and a lot of people are once again remembering that capitalism, like democracy, isn't perfect. It's just the least worst system we can come up with. The consolidation of enterprise into these monolithic mega conglomerates like Apple and Google and Facebook and Disney, etc., it poses some genuine questions about the way our society is to be structured in the future. Hell, even the recent Blizzard controversy shows how easily basic universal principles like democracy and free speech can be sold down the river if it means appealing to global markets who don't share the same values. This stuff is topical right now, and The Outer Worlds tackles many of these issues in a way that is thought-provoking without being preachy or one-sided. The setting for The Outer Worlds is a late-stage capitalist dystopia, where corporations have taken control of every government apparatus and are now colonizing distant planets as independent sovereign powers. Mega corporations like Space's Choice and Sublight Salvage and a whole host of others have each staked their claim on various planets and townships to offer up a cradle-to-grave form of indentured servitude for its citizens, and if they don't like it, they can feel free to wander off into the wilderness and starve. The realization of this world is so brilliant and so consistent and so funny. You're talking about a place where people's net worth is printed on their tombstone when they die, where religion has been replaced by the law, a faith that conveniently lines up with the company's desire to see people both docile and productive, where one's annual performance review is literally a live or die encounter. The Outer Worlds takes these basic concepts that we've internalized as part of regular working life and stretch them just short of breaking point, and the humor in it is so relatable because we've likely lived some of this overbearing corporate wankery ourselves at some point. At least I certainly have.
Well, new business turns up at last. Celia, didn't I tell you our new statistics-based advertising model would be a hit?
That you did, sir.
How can yield improvements of 26.7% not quicken the pulse? How can 32% cost savings not moisten the loins?
You've often posed these very questions.
But the late-stage capitalist dystopia setup isn't just for gags and relatability. The real success of the game is how this setup is used to get the player thinking about all of this stuff and forces them to make decisions that are either in support of the status quo or railing against it. Every new planet you visit is in the midst of some sort of societal breakdown, be it in the form of a salt tuna cannery no longer operating at peak efficiency, leading to food shortages, or the existence of breakaway factions who refuse to work for the company anymore and have gone to live off in the wilderness, or rich autocrats frustrated that they have to share space with low-born worker bees. There's friction in every unique society you visit, and at every level of that society, and the central question running through all of your interactions and quests and decision-making is, how far will you go to prop up what is an inherently exploitative or broken system, or how far will you go to destroy it? Now, when I phrase it this way, I think I'm really selling short just how finely balanced and nuanced this portrayal of capitalism is. Certainly the game does lean into the cold villainy of it with regular delight, but it goes to great lengths to communicate the reality that capitalism is our best organizing principle. Many of the choices you make throughout your playthrough aren't freedom fighter good, corporate executive bad. Instead, they showcase how much creative destruction is required in order to collapse a capitalist system, and it asks you to consider, is that price worth paying? It showcases how responsible, functional corporations who balance commercial imperatives with the needs of their workers can actually be a force for good. And it does showcase how militant anti-corporate movements can be a far worse alternative than a life spent under capitalist yoke. A few months back, Obsidian developers stated that their game would deal with political themes, but that it wouldn't be politically charged and it definitely wouldn't lecture players. And I have to say that this is a job exceptionally well done here. This is a game that is saying things about the real world through its fictitious world, but it's presenting a nuanced, balanced, and explorative window through which to view things, rather than a one-sided, narrow, and preachy megaphone that would surely have grated on audiences. If you want to play The Outer Worlds and never grapple with any of its imagery or messaging or themes, you can absolutely do that. But if you really want to grapple with this game and its world and its characters, you can do that as well. And that's really only possible because the writing is so damn solid. A few weeks back, I reviewed Greedfall. Now, Greedfall was pretty well received by the majority of people and has a respectable showing on Metacritic. For a game made by only like 40 people, Greedfall is a solid title that scratches an itch long unscratched. A decent BioWare or Elder Scrolls inspired game, the likes of which we've not seen for a number of years. For me, I didn't much like Greedfall because I think it failed to deliver on what I believe is the most important feature in a game like this: great writing and compelling characters that I want to hang out with and learn more about. These are games where you're spending at least 50% of the time staring at people's faces, just listening and responding to dialogue. So unless the people speaking are engaging, or unless they're saying some really interesting stuff, the game doesn't have much hope of succeeding. I don't think Greedfall succeeded in this regard, which is why the game fell so flat for me. Okay, so this is my hot take, and I know a lot of people are going to hate this. But I think Greedfall was as well received as it was, not because it was inherently great, but because people were so desperate for it to be good given the drought we've experienced since basically like Mass Effect 2 and Fallout New Vegas. I think The Outer Worlds will remind everyone what a great game looks like in this genre, because it absolutely nails the critical elements of good writing and strong characterization. Because yes, if there is one thing I absolutely loved about this game, it is the writing and the characters. It is so rare these days to find AAA games that invest in their writing. For every Red Dead or God of War, there's like 24 Breakpoints or Andromedas or Wolfenstein Youngbloods.
Perfect.
Good writing is a thing. It matters. It's the difference between Fallout 4 and Fallout New Vegas. I've spent like 25 hours in The Outer Worlds, and in that time, I've met more interesting characters than I have in the previous 6 months of playing pretty much every major release. From your very first interaction after you crash land on the Emerald Vale, you can immediately tell that conversations are going to be anything but boring.
Hey, you, come here. You've tried the best now. Now try the rest. Spacer's Choice. Oh, wow, that stings. All Spacer's Choice weapons are now 30% less likely to malfunction. You've tried the best, now try the rest. Spacer's Choice. Yes, nailed it that time.
Every new character you bump into has their own unique backstory, idioms, turns of phrase, likes, dislikes, prejudices, and more, and it all comes through so clearly. Every interaction is a new clarion call for your attention and your interest, and rarely have I delighted so much in just exhausting all of the dialogue options as I learn more about these strange people and their stranger worlds. This is such a critical part of the gameplay loop for a game of this type. The overall rhythm is land on a new location with your ship, explore the township to see what's up, and then set about solving everyone's problems in whatever way serves your interests best. This is a game of constant introductions and exposition, and if that isn't snappy and compelling, you're going to lose interest in the game really fast. Of all the things I loved about this game, and there were a lot of them that I loved, the writing was chief among them. There's just a tautness to it that belies its intelligence. You can feel good writing when you read it or you hear it, and it's reverberating so strongly through all parts of the Outer Worlds. One of the best showcases for this are your companions. Now, there are 6 companions you'll bump into throughout your journey, and each of them have their own stories and personalities that make you want to spend time with them. You can take 2 companions into the field at any one time, and I was honestly sad about this because I wanted to take all of them. They each had something interesting to say whenever I brought them along, even Sam, my janitor bot. In fact, especially Sam, he was the best of us.
Let Sam get the grime out. It's what our units do best.
What I think these characters do well, besides being likable and engaging, is that they each highlight a section of the world and force us to consider it more deeply. The Vicar Maximilian shines a light on the hypocrisy of a religion conceived to serve corporate interests, while Parvati, or Janice as she likes to be called, shows us that loyalty to the company isn't just blind servitude or naivety, it can be from a genuine place of concern for the well-being of others. Felix is a right scoundrel and shows us how much hustle it takes to survive under the tank tracks of a corporate machine. Ellie's story shows us how the other half live, while Nyoka's reckless, drunken brutality shows us what it takes to survive in a frontier world. Exploring the various companion quests that each of them have deepens your appreciation for not only the characters themselves, not only the world they live in, but for the different perspectives that they each occupy about that world. It's very well done. This is a brilliantly written game, and I can't say that about many games these days. This is a brilliantly written game, and if you like good writing, you should buy this video game.
Good old Stellar Bay. Only place on the planet that don't stink of sulfur. On account of it stinking like fish instead. You
Cause you had a bad day, you take it one down.
The other major component of a game like this is the RPG and the combat. Let's talk about the combat first, since there really isn't that much to talk about. Historically, games like these don't really focus that much on compelling combat, and The Outer Worlds isn't that much of an exception. Combat is fine. You have a choice of melee weapons or range weapons like handguns, assault rifles, shotguns, sniper rifles, LMGs, or flamethrowers. They all feel pretty good to use. If you've played Fallout 4, then you're going to have a pretty good sense of what to expect. It doesn't feel particularly sophisticated or refined, but it does the job well enough and keeps the game moving. VATS makes a return, it's sort of better than VATS actually. You're able to slow down time and target specific parts of an enemy to proc your weapon's status effects, and you can of course put points into this meter to use it more often. It feels nice though, unlike Fallout, it's very easy to ignore this mechanic entirely and just rely on regular old gunplay. Some of the depth of the combat comes from the type of damage that you're dealing and the way you use your companions. Weapons deal specific elemental damage like shock, which deals bonus damage to machines, or plasma, which deals bonus damage damage to organics. You can equip 4 weapons at a time, so having a good mix of damage types along with different weapon varieties prompts you to switch things up on the rig. Your companions also have activatable abilities that you can command to use them as long as you invest a few points into that sort of thing. This is perhaps the worst part of the combat model. Each time you trigger these abilities, it prompts a short cutscene and there's no way to skip it. It's really cool the first time you see it, but by about the 6th time of hearing Nyoka go, you really don't want to hear it ever again. I actually found myself avoiding the use of these abilities simply because the cutscenes were both annoying and disruptive, taking me out of the regular flow of combat. What I found really interesting here though was the way that traditional non-combat RPG stats like Persuasion and Hacking can have a very meaningful impact on combat. Persuasion gives enemies a chance to cower in fear when you do damage to them, and Hacking gives you a chance to hack enemy robots, making them friendly for a time. There are at least 5 or 6 other RPG stats that straddle both combat and non-combat in this way, and I think it's a brilliant innovation that a lot of RPGs will pick up in the future. It makes the RPG decision making far more rewarding and nuanced when you aren't focused so crudely between fighty and non-fighty builds, since all RPGs, no matter how much they offer non-violent paths, will at times descend into combat. So better that you are somewhat prepared for that inevitability rather than spending the entire time hoping it doesn't materialize. This leads to a broader discussion about how RPG systems work in the Outer Worlds. It starts with character creation, which is very good indeed, and it will surely afford you hours of tinkering fun if that's your jam. When the looks are all out of the way, it's time to choose your stats, and that's when things get really interesting. There are 18 different stats for you to choose from, with the first part of the leveling process being a summary stat that brings up everything in that group, and once you reach a certain threshold, you then begin putting points into specific stats to refine and finalize your build. There's also perk points which provide a range of benefits, and things like your companions and your gear will further augment your stats. All told, there are about 8 or 9 variables that go into shaping your stat page, so there's a lot of flexibility in the way you can customize your build. RPG systems like this live and die on the basis of how much they open or close paths to the player. You want to know that when you make a choice, it's meaningful, and that means it has to allow you to do things you wouldn't otherwise be able to do, solving problems in your own specific way. Similarly, you want some doors to close when you make that choice, because if you can do everything all the time, then the value of your choice is less meaningful. I'm going to say that the Outer Worlds does an exceptional job of opening doors for you, but it does a less good job of closing other doors, leading to an experience that feels a little more freeform than I was hoping for. I'll explain. So when I went into this on normal difficulty, I said to myself, I'm basically going to be Han Solo. I'm going to be a smooth-talking, wisecracking scoundrel with a blaster at my side and a heart of gold in my knapsack. I put points into handguns and persuasion, and off I went. Pretty soon I realized that the leveling system, which forced me to bring all of my weapon stats up at once, meant that I could move between all ranged weapons with ease, and since I found a nice assault rifle that kind of did the job, I switched over to that. Similarly, I found that most of the skill checks for my dialogue interactions were actually pretty low, so I didn't need to put that many points into that to make it effective. I could also really easily jack those stats by wearing specific clothes or by having specific people in my party, so I could sort of game the system when I needed to. This let me branch out, and so I started putting points into science and stealth-based stuff, so I could now upgrade weapons extremely cheaply, and I could hack any terminal I found, and I could lockpick any door I could find, etc, etc. By the end, it felt like I'd kind of broken the game. Even though I'd put almost no points into combat, I was able to kill everything extremely quickly and easily because I'd had enough points in various skills that made that possible. I also never had to use a single consumable throughout my entire playthrough because combat was just too easy. I felt that however I wanted to approach a mission, be it all guns blazing, or stealth, or hacking, or lockpicking, or talking my way through it, I could do it. I was essentially all-powerful. This obviously meant that I had complete freedom to approach objectives any which way I saw fit, but I think that sort of freedom hurts an experience like this. In the very, very rare instances I was forced into an approach that I wasn't quite skilled up for, that was when the game felt most compelling and tense and difficult. Sadly, those circumstances are all too rare. There is a solution to what I'm describing here though, and it comes in the form of a Supernova Difficulty. This game mode makes enemies more challenging, adds survival elements, allows companions to die permanently, and limits your save scumming. If you're looking to really experience what Obsidian have built here, play, this is the way to do it. I've just started a Supernova playthrough and I'm already finding it way more rewarding since I'm finding every game system is pushing back on me in a way that normal mode just wouldn't allow for. What I might recommend is you do a normal mode playthrough to understand the fundamentals of the game, and then a Supernova playthrough where you make completely different choices in both your build and your quests. Because yes, at its heart and despite its minor shortcomings, The Outer Worlds is a game that begs to be played repeatedly. There's simply too much in every facet of this game for you to be able to see it all in one playthrough, and doing it only once over is like playing Nier Automata through only ending A. There's 4 more real endings to be enjoyed there, and it feels like there's vastly more than that to be experienced here in this game, especially when it's this well written and this functional and this pretty and this charming. In 2002, Joss Whedon, fresh off his Buffy and Angel success, aired the ill-fated Firefly. It was about a ragtag group of space pirates led by, well look, basically Han Solo 2.0. But the lovable crew and the adventures they got tangled up in and the strange places they visited, all of it combined to create something so wonderful. Sadly, the stars were not in Joss Whedon's favor this time, and Firefly was cancelled before the end of its first season, but that didn't stop it from developing a cult following that lives on to this day. For me, The Outer Worlds takes on a special significance because it feels like the closest we're ever going to get to a real Firefly game. When I rolled my character for the first time, I wasn't really rolling Han Solo, I was rolling Captain Mal, and as I played through the game and I made all my choices, I kept asking myself, what would Mal do? That's the power of great role-playing games. They transport us away and allow us to fill other shoes. They give us worlds to explore, characters to create memories with, challenges for us to overcome, and if it's done all the right things in all the right ways, we feel drawn back into those worlds, and we want to do it again, but different this time. The Outer Worlds isn't perfect by any means, but it's exactly what I was hoping it would be, and that's more than enough for me to get excited about the prospect of coming back to the world of Halcyon again and again. If good writing is your jam, then let me tell you about something that I absolutely could not live without: Audible. Now, I don't know about you guys, but for me, finding the time to like sit down and read a book and just do that, that's just not possible these days. Like it's just not, I just can't find that time. I'm like, my whole life I feel like I always need to be multitasking. I feel like if I'm just doing one thing at a time, then I'm not making the most of my time. I know that's probably bad, but like it's the truth, right? And so reading books really fell by the wayside, but Audible allows me to get through books, new releases, old stuff, whatever else, because I can listen to it while I'm doing other things. While I'm at the gym, while I'm shopping, while I'm on the way to the office, literally while I'm like grinding levels in Final Fantasy XIV, I'm like listening to audiobooks while I'm doing that, and it feels pretty good. Audible has the world's largest selection of audiobooks and audio entertainment, including Audible Originals, which are stories created exclusively for audio, including documentaries, exclusive audiobooks, and scripted shows that you can't hear anywhere else. With the convenient Audible app, you can listen at any time, anywhere, on any device, like mobile or Alexa or Bluetooth and more. Every month, you can choose one audiobook regardless of its price, as well as 2 Audible Originals from a fresh selection, and you get to keep your library of titles forever, even if you cancel your subscription. Personally, I'm a bit of a history buff, so I recently just finished a complete biography of Winston Churchill. I'm now listening to a biography of Napoleon. Before that, I listened to a complete history of ancient Rome, and before that, I heard a lecture series on Introduction to Classical Physics. So obviously I'm a pretty big nerd, but maybe you have other interests. Maybe you want to read some other thing. I don't know. There's video game stuff on there. One audiobook I really enjoyed was Blood, Sweat and Pixels by Jason Schreier, who went behind the scenes with half a dozen studios to show how the sausage gets made in the video game business. Really good stuff. I really recommend it. Start listening with a 30-day Audible trial. Choose 1 audiobook and 2 Audible Originals absolutely free. Visit audible.com/skillup. That's SKILLUP. It's literally free to start, and I promise you, Audible will like make your life better. It honestly will. The more books we consume, the better. Audible makes that possible. I really recommend checking it out. That's it. Thanks Audible for sponsoring the video. Thank you for watching it, and see you next time. Bye-bye.